My business partner Nick has never forgiven me for this decision. But I just said at this time, I said it was like Brewster's Millions. Do you remember that movie with Richard Pryor? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You create chaos because here's the thing, and this is the dilemma, and this is the problem. Yeah. I do kick myself from time to time when I think about that decision.
This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. This week, we speak to Adam Oldfield, founder and CEO of Force24. Adam tells us all about the dangers of having too much money in the business, how market pressure forced him to change the business offering, and how he rejected, perhaps wrongly in hindsight, an offer to sell the business. The business surgery question this week is, our team is growing and I'm recruiting. Any tips on writing job descriptions and roles and responsibilities documents? Before we start, I have one simple request of you. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on the app that you're listening on. That's it. Thank you. Okay, so let's get into an episode that is jam-packed full of great advice for running your business. Welcome to this week's episode of the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm delighted to have with me Adam Oldfield, founder and CEO of Force24. Good morning, Adam.
Morning, Phil. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Now, it's actually quite relevant. Today's podcast is brought to you in association with Leeds-based YFM Equity Partners, and that's quite relevant, isn't it, Adam? Because you've taken equity from them.
Yes, we have. Been a fantastic partner so far.
Fantastic. Well, we'll get into that a bit later on, but just to tell you, YFM Equity Partners offer investments from 2 to 15 million pounds, specifically to fast-growing businesses, as well as providing the resources and expertise needed to take your business to the next level. So if you're an entrepreneur with a vision for growth, whether you're expanding your market or scaling operations, YFM Equity Partners can help you turn your ambitions for your business into reality. So if you're looking to partner with a team that believes in your potential, you can find out more at yfmep.com. That address is also at the top of the show notes. And when you do contact, or if you contact YFM, make sure you tell them that Phil from Leeds Business Podcast sent you. And Adam will no doubt later on tell you all about YFM. So, Adam, Force24, in one sentence, explain to our listeners who you are and what you do.
We're a UK-based marketing automation platform. We help brands connect to their audiences more effectively.
That's your elevator. There you go. You've had Adam's elevator pitch. So you've obviously not always done Force24. Let's go back in time. You started out in a web agency, and then ended up at a full service agency called Outside the Box. So tell us how that came about.
Yeah, sure. So I formed the web agency in 1999, which, as you can imagine, what the internet landscape looked like in 1999. That was an interesting position. I developed that web agency for the next 7 years, and we latched onto a niche within B2B e-com, powered by mostly the Business Link grant funding that was available at the time. So it was a great time to be in that marketplace. We grew from sort of seed until we were about sort of 20 guys in our office on Regent Street in Leeds. And in 2006, we were working alongside an agency Outside the Box on a number of projects, and we felt that the two carriages would be better as one rolling down the track. So we merged the two companies in 2006.
Okay, and Outside the Box was just a normal full service agency, is that right?
Yeah, it was a creative agency. They focus heavily on the creative messaging behind the brand, the driving force behind the brand, and I felt that was actually probably one of our areas of weakness. It's all well and good building infrastructure and tech, but it's not until you connect the user to the story and the emotions that all of it starts to become exponentially more powerful. So I felt it was a really good combination, and it worked well.
Okay. So just to actually a minor point there, you obviously you set up your own business, then joined with another business. How did that work? Because I know business owners can be very single-minded, and how did it work? Sort of working with other business owners almost like as a joint team. How did that work from a sort of a management and emotional point of view?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because they sort of they said, look, we're going to go through a set of emotions here. We're going to go through forming, storming, norming, and performing range of emotions. And it's true. You go through the initial honeymoon period where we're all aligned, everything's good, and then you go through the storming period where the cracks start to form, and then you go through the norming period where you're trying to fix things, and then you get onto the performing period. And I think we got to the norming period, and I at that point was feeling like, do you know what? I think I've given all that I can in this world, and actually I feel like there's a different world for me to step into now, for me to support marketeers at a lot much larger scale with something that I could see forming. So that was why it felt like, actually it's better that you go on to do the performing and I move on to do something different.
Okay, so what advice would you give somebody who runs their own business and is thinking of merging with somebody else's business?
Yeah, it's massively difficult, okay, because it's very rare that you meet somebody that is it's like finding a new wife or a new husband. It's that kind of level of intimacy, almost, maybe not quite as intimate, but the point is you are you have to have shared goals, you have to have a shared vision. And so that rarely happens. That rarely is perfect. So it's probably realistic to think that one of the founders is going to exit at some point in 1 year, 2 year, 10 years, 20 years, who knows? Or maybe you nail it. Maybe you get the chemistry just right, the vision and the alignment is perfect, the roles, responsibilities are clearly understood, and everybody just goes off and creates a wonderful environment. But it's not to say don't do it, because overall, my reflection of the experience was it was the right thing to do at the time, and it was the right thing to do to create the platform for me to move on to create Force24. So, whilst there were ups and downs in the moment, when you sort of smooth it all out, it was the right thing and it was a positive thing to do. And I learned a lot during the experience, and it made me a more rounded individual. So all told, it was the right thing to do. But is it always easy and plain sailing? No, definitely.
Right. Okay. So as obviously we're alluding to, you left outside the box. Just before we talk about Force24, just talk us through that point where you walk in and you go, guys, I'm going, and then sort of how you actually extricated yourself sort of legally and strategically. How did that work?
Yeah, well, it was an exit to the other shareholders. So we'd as I said, we went through the forming, the storming, and we were in this sort of norming sort of phase where energy was a little bit low, and tensions were a little bit higher between the individual directors, and so therefore when I had sort of plucked up the courage essentially to say, yeah, I'm accepting, I think this is the right time, which was a really hard thing for me to do, by the way. It was really hard. Forget the actual words coming out of everybody's mouths at the moment in time. It was down to me to physically say, in my mind, yes, the end is nigh. Let's figure out how we get through this and exit most gracefully. And that's what we did. So we agreed a deal between the existing shareholders, and they bought me out. And I didn't really need a lot from the old world, because it was all up here that I needed, and the vision was clear for me. All I needed was a little bit of cash to help grease the wheels for the next stage.
Okay. And what was that vision? Because you obviously there's two sides to it. One is this isn't working. Fine, I'm getting out. And the second thing is what I'm going to do next. So what was that vision, and how did forming that look like?
Yeah. Okay. So at the time, the vision, I mean, it's so interesting because I can genuinely feel what it feels like to have a true purpose with this, because the vision itself morphs ever so slightly, but it morphs as your understanding changes. So my vision was a technical requirement. It was as simple as, okay, I need to be able to give customers the ability to give their customers a better digital experience. by learning what people are doing on the customer's website, by learning how they're interacting with communication. So that was the first thing. The next thing was, and I also need to be able to automate things like birthday messages, or I don't know, whatever it might be. Just sending an email to somebody on their birthday at that time was one of those things that would be like, okay, how do you do that again? It's like 2009, this was, it was like, okay, I need to send an email. And, I think MailChimp maybe had a feature where it could send an email on somebody's birthday, but that was it. And, let's imagine that it wasn't somebody's birthday. It was somebody's MOT or somebody's contract expiry or so it was saying like, okay, time-based triggered communications were very expensive to achieve, usually done through in-house tech or very, very big software platforms that were doing it. And remember, this is 2009, so the world was a very different place back then. So that was the original technical vision.
So you've got the vision, you know what you want to do. And the weird thing, and it's always interesting when we talk about tech historically, because people listening to that, I go, well, that's just normal now. I get cross if I don't get a reminder from somebody, here's £5 off because it's your birthday, or your MOT's due, or your contract's expired. So you've got the vision, okay. With sort of startup head in mind, what did starting look like? You quit on a Friday, you start on a Monday. What does that look like?
Yeah, so it was firstly I knew that the first incarnation of our platform was going to be a managed service, and that the only organizations that would be able to afford and warrant a managed service at that time would be enterprise. So the business was very much focused on enterprise businesses at that stage, and very quickly, with a fairly unique message, was able to win favor with some of the biggest brands in the UK, which was really quite phenomenal when you think about today, how difficult that would be, with the pressure from all the software vendors. But back then, we connected up with WorldPay, with Michelin, both still customers. Biffa, loads of these great brands that just needed a problem solving, and we just took in our black box of magic tricks, showed them the solution, showed them what they could achieve, and all of a sudden we've got customers rolling through the door. So that was really, really exciting at that point. And at that point, as I say, the vision was a technical vision, but I've later unpicked that to understand actually what was I trying to do with that. What was the why for wanting to do that in the first place? So whilst the vision isn't the same words, it was actually the same end goal. And so I don't know if you want me to move into the transition now that we went on over the current years, or whether we want to stage that.
We'll come on to transition in a minute. So we're going to talk about funding. How did you fund the startup, and how big was the team when you started it?
Yeah, so the startup was funded by our own funds. I got a seed investor who was one of the startup clients actually, and still a friend today. And the seed investor put in it was modest sums. We both put in fairly modest sums, and my commitment was, in addition to the proof of concept engineering work that I'd paid, was that I fund myself. So that my own personal costs were covered through my own personal funds and means. So the seed capital was probably less than 200k, maybe I don't know, I can't remember exactly, yeah. But let's say it was probably less than 200k. And so in the early days, the team was obviously just myself as we were building out the proof of concept. And the first customers that were won, I very quickly spooled up to a team of freelancers, which I then brought in-house, which I then started to layer up with the various different layers of management over the course of time. So first of all, you've got me, chief cook and bottle washer, selling and doing, with freelancers doing creative and coding work, which I then started to say, right, okay, bring that utility in-house. Now I need a management layer, an account management layer above that, and so brought in account manager, and the first account manager still works for us today, which is a great success story. And then just started to build out the departments. But the thing with bootstrapping is the fact that you don't always buy the best talent because you can't attract it and you can't afford it. So this is a really difficult challenge. So, I've got people in there then that I'm really having to support and help and make that, rather than them lead the way and take the charge. By the way, all the people in those early days, amazing, fantastic people. And they've gone on to have really great careers outside of Force24, those that have left. But it was, the burden on myself was high. And the problem is, as you say, Bootstrap, I can't go and knock on the door of the creative head of one of the top leads agencies and say, I'll give you 150 grand a year, give you equity, blah, blah. I can't do that. I cannot afford it. So I've got to cut my cloth accordingly. But this is where the vision comes in. If you've got that vision, you can do that.
Well, it's interesting. Daniel Priestley was on a few months ago, and he was talking about selling, and one of the things he was talking about was selling to the team, selling them the vision and getting them on board and getting them all aligned. But I'm nodding along as you're talking about your startup story, because mine was exactly the same. It was Bootstrap, it was freelancers, and then it's bodies in desks. It's not necessarily the best person. It's just I need an account manager. So we got straight out of university, and as you say, the other side of it then is you do a lot of hand holding, rather than later on in the journey you bring people in who go, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do this, and you go, wow, that's brilliant, and it flips the other way around. So yeah, nodding along to that on the bootstrapping side of things. Now you alluded to it a few minutes ago. You had a sort of strategic flip. Was that right? I think we talked about this around 2013, 14. So talk us through the situation you were in and what the flip was and why you had to do it.
Yeah, so in 2013, we started to see downward pressure from Salesforce, Adobe, IBM. And so, you imagine you're the CIO of, a huge brand, and you've got little old Force24, at that time, 6-7 guys in an office banging out, critical business communications on your brand's behalf. And so what happened was, all of a sudden we started to get downwards pressure from the likes of Salesforce and Marketo and Adobe, whoever. And so that created a problem. And back then our revenue was split between sort of, I think in 2014, I think we had about 16 clients, and 16 clients with generating our entire revenue. And, I can imagine most businesses listening to that say, oh, yeah, well, 16 is quite a lot, or, yeah, well, that's probably what we've got or whatever. And that was a position that I felt uncomfortable with, because pretty much every day that you won a client, you were a day closer to losing it or whatever it may be, and that was the feeling back then. This downward pressure was becoming palpable. But here was the interesting thing, Phil, back then, even still today, actually, the marketing teams of those businesses didn't come to us and say, oh, you know what, we've bought Salesforce and we know we got Marketing Cloud coming in, so we're going to have to end our contract. What they did was they said, yeah, our CIOs bought Salesforce, they've bought Marketing Cloud. How do I keep you doing what you're doing, but call it something else so that it can slide under the radar and we can just handle this over the next 5 years and nobody's in an... And so that became a reality. And so with the likes of Travis Perkins and businesses like that, it was more a case now of, we were almost flying under the radar, afraid to put marketing automation services on an invoice because it would get picked up by somebody. But yet we're still delivering critical business communications for these brands. And it was a really interesting one. So at that point, the strategic flip that came was, right, we need to drive down in the market. If Salesforce, Marketo, they're driving down the market, we've got to drive down in the market. And so the vision then was, I've got to now drive value at a much lower price point. How do I mobilize my teams, my technology, everything that I've got in my business to serve a customer for as little as £299 a month, right? And we set that sort of line in the sand. You know, we were up at 40,000 a month, 50,000 a month, and some were spending a lot more than that. And so we've got to now go from up there to £299 a month. Granted, the same customers wouldn't be getting the same service for the £299 a month, but the point is, we've got to be able to deliver the service. So we all of a sudden started to invest very heavily back into engineering. And all of a sudden, you imagine you're in a bootstrapped business that now needs to put another 40-50% cost on as we're going straight for this release of the new product. So we had to really double down on our enterprise clients because they were generating the cash whilst focusing in evenings and weekends and whenever on engineering to support the growth of our new self-service product-led product, which we managed to launch in 2016. And we flipped our focus, and we were driving down the market, learned a lot about how to sell to SMEs, what the drivers were, what the problems in their market became, and how to connect to them.
You mentioned sort of £40,000 a month and £299 a month. So in effect, you've got almost like two products at that point, I'm guessing, or two services.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the vision actually was that we have one, and that an enterprise client can get the value at £40,000 that an SME can also buy for £299. I know that it's not because we're charging them more because they're really dumb. We're charging them more because there's more professional services wrapped around it. It's black boxed. It's so on and so forth. So the idea was that this is the SME advantage. And this is what I'm all about personally. And I now realize more about what my vision stands for. And, enabling the marketing, but it's enabling the marketeer to create cut through irrespective of the budget. That's what matters. And so the tools were designed. So, we're using those for these guys up here. You should be able to use them and, do great work, but at a lower price point.
Right. Okay. Right. Before we carry on, I need to talk to our viewers and listeners about the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. The Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal has two sides to it. My side of it is I bring you every week, free of charge, wonderful, inspiring, motivational and knowledgeable guests like Adam every single week. Your side of the deal, listener and viewer, has two parts to it. Part number one, recommend this podcast to one other person you feel will get benefit from it. And part number two, I want you to write a review of the show either on the Apple Podcasts app or at podchaser.com. So that's the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. Fair deal, Adam?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so we've got this sort of switch in strategy and product. What's the next big challenge that comes along?
So the next big challenge is obviously scale, and scale is then a problem. You can get a lot of customers at 299 quid and still not pay the bills. So you've got to cross that chasm of scale, and so what we found was for 2016, 17, 18, 19. Our revenue basically stayed flat, stayed flat. But the difference was the underlying was being made up by contracted SME revenue, which was much stronger, much more, much more reliable. All of a sudden, one of the enterprise clients can just totally swamp you and everybody's working 24/7. And then the next minute, nobody's working because we've had a bit of a spending freeze or whatever it is. Across the year, it smooths out, but in that period. So the SME revenue was, sort of propping up that revenue and began to overall replace it. So that the switch into 2019 was, I don't know how many customers we had, probably about 500 or something like that by 2019. And it was, right, we need to now gear up for significant growth. And that was when we spoke to YFM. And the private equity journey began.
Okay, so talk us through that whole process of finding private equity? Because not a lot of businesses
So
get to that point. It's quite big boy stuff now. Is private equity? So
yeah.
talk us through it. How did you approach it? Talk us through the process.
Yeah, so firstly, we were absolutely unaware as to how our business would be valued, what its value was, and our aspirations were really quite modest. So we went into this with sort of, like the old poker face. We don't want to give our game away. We want you to tell us what you think, and then to try and understand what was what. So we pointed, first of all, my first piece of advice. Corporate finance partners, a CF partner is critical, because they're the ones that have a vested interest in getting your valuation right up. So a CF partner, we chose at the time Grant Thornton, and Grant Thornton came to us. We spoke to a number of different partners. There's lots of different ones out on the market. Grant Thornton did a great pitch. We liked the guys, and so we decided to give them the work. Grant Thornton then focused us on the IM, information memorandum, which would be then the pack that they circulate to the various PE houses. We went through an education as to the various different types of funding. And we landed on the VCT funding structure as being probably the most likely for us being eligible. And so Grant Thornton then sent out this IM to 30 different PE houses across the country. 12 of them came back to us and said, yeah, we're in the market, we're interested, we're really... We'd also said to Grant Thornton, we don't want to be hawking up and down the country, having meetings with PE houses. I need to get the best 12. So if we're going to talk to people, we're going to whittle it down to 3 or 4, and we're then going to go hard and heavy on that 3 or 4, and then we're going to go. So actually the IM was quite aggressive. So we were quite happy to have got 12 through the door. And we go down this road, and it's an eye-opener, yeah, because our business has run with 2 directors and a financial controller. And we're now having to provide all of this insight, this management information, clarity on the team structures, and everything that you want to know about the business. And of course, we haven't been thinking like that. We are totally unaware that that's how you think. And so we're having to do all this stuff on the hoof, which is normal, by the way. I don't think anybody is sat there saying, oh, well, no, absolutely. I've got a business model that stretches out to 5 years, and it's got about 5 different contingency points in it. And we know exactly where we're going, and I've got a team structure that's well mapped out. No, I get that. It's normal. But you need that. So, that's not going anywhere. Then we find 2 or 3, and we get down to 2 or 3. We get 2 or 3 horses in the race. We go through the process, and we select YFM. YFM, Mike Clark from YFM, was, it's just like, it was like, I instantly thought, yeah, that's a guy actually that I would like to work with, and that's a guy I can connect with. And I've got to say, everybody that we've met during the YFM journey has been of that particular ilk. And our current investment director, Jonathan, top bloke, the kind of people that you can work with. To be honest with you, I have to be fair in saying that everybody in the process from the PE side felt like that, but Mike stood out, and I thought, yeah, this is great, and Ian as well at the time. So move forward with YFM, but just before we put pen to paper, we get a curveball thrown in, and the curveball was not from YFM, but it was a trade buyer. So our exclusivity lapsed for 30 days before the deal. So and genuinely, 3 days after that lapse, in comes a trade buyer, and we're like, okay, well, we've got a lot of information that we've paid for, so let's share that information with the trade buyer. Our exclusivity has lapsed, so we're in the clear to do this, and so off we go. And Mike Clark, we string him out for a couple of days while the trade buyer goes away and analyzes everything. And the trade buyer comes back and says, we're going to give you this much money. And both Nick and I, our jaws hit the floor. And we were like, oh my goodness me. Well, this is it. We're on the beach. We've done it. We nailed it. So then the weirdest thing happened. And this kind of scares me. So you'd thought at this point, okay, so you've just now got this is your golden ticket. You're on the beach. Here's millions of pounds landing in your bank account today, and more millions of pounds landing in 365 days. Wow. So anyway, I go home and tell my wife, and she's like, okay, so what are you going to do after that? I'm like, oh, I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, I better think about that. Tell some of my friends, and of course all my friends are like, oh wow, this is amazing, this is brilliant. And then over the course of the next 3 or 4 days, it's like, hold on just a moment, I've got YFM there wanting to just chunk money in, okay, and I've got a trade buyer wanting to chunk money in for me to basically give them everything that we've done. So that's instant, and that's going to take a bit longer, but it should be bigger, right? And I get to keep myself busy for the next few years. And my business partner Nick has never forgiven me for this decision, but I just said at this time, I said, I don't want to do it. I want to go with YFM. I want to go on the journey. I want to go really put our back into it, utilize the capital that we've raised, and just go and make this thing into a rocket ship. Let's go do that. And so we did. And COVID struck overnight. So, what's up is now down, and what's down is now up, and left is right, And so that was a massive, massive switch. We would have been on the beach in COVID with the money, and that would have been a great thing. But no, didn't. It's not because I'm greedy, genuinely not that, because we live a modest life. We have nice house and nice things, I guess, but it's modest in comparison. And it's not about the money. It genuinely was. And this is what excited me and scared me, was it's about the purpose. It's about what we're here to do. And that money was not it. That wasn't what it was. And so, yeah, I do kick myself from time to time when I think about that decision.
So you'd have cashed out just before COVID.
Yeah, we'd have cashed out probably halfway through 2020. So it was actually during it would have overlapped, but yeah, more or less, yeah. But actually, COVID for us was a great time. People turned to digital, and so we saw. So we probably would have accelerated our exit and had a really great outcome. But obviously we didn't know that at the time, and we didn't really know much about COVID either when we were doing the deal. So yeah.
Wow. That's a big call. I mean, I exited, I got the big bag of cash. And the question your wife said is relevant. What the hell do you do afterwards? You can only go on a limited number of holidays. You can only play golf for a certain amount of time. You can only buy lots of cars and watches and whatever. You've got to do something. So yeah, no, I get that. I get that. So we've made the big decision. YFM's money has come in. So just go back slightly, very quickly. The trade buyer, had they seen the IM, or did they just come totally out of the blue?
Totally out of the blue. We sent them the IM. Well, we don't know whether somebody in the PE world has maybe back channeled it to the M&A director over there. Don't know, but the approach came in. So it seemed really convenient 3 days after the exclusivity lapse. And now you've said that, I'm thinking maybe somebody somewhere did say, hey, you should have a look at this opportunity. But, we don't know. I don't know. And it is what it is. And we said no. So there you go.
Okay. So YFM put money in. I assume they get equity. They're shareholders now. Is that right? Okay. Does that affect your business thinking? Are you the back of your mind always thinking, should I do this, or is this the right thing for YFM, or do you just have they just said, Adam, you go and do what it is, and we'll roll with it?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Phil, because that was the thing that I was most scared of, having been through the outside the box with the norming forming. So I was most scared of the fact that, okay, are we going to have a big ego in the room that's sort of guiding the business direction and strategy? No, look, VCT is not like that. I haven't got experience of VC or PE outside of VCT, but VCT is about backing founders. And it's about understanding what they know and getting behind their vision. And so as a result, actually, it's been accretive to the board, so what YFM's, this isn't a pitch for YFM. I'm just explaining literally what I've been through. What YFM then did was start to say, look, that pain that you went through in trying to get the IM pack ready and build it. Let's just make that life. So that's how we operate. That's what we do. And so that's great. And it's not me, there's a CFO that does that now, and there's a whole exec team that support with providing information. And so now when we do roll through to an acquisition or whatever it may be, we can pretty much just roll out this pack that's beautifully prepared, absolute clarity on where we're going. And it feels great because I've got that clarity on where we're going. So that rigor was what was needed. And it's important. Now, the other thing was at that time, not at the time, but one of the stipulations is you've got to have a non-exec. You've got to have a non-exec chair. And so YFM or any PE house will say, look, if you haven't got a non-exec, or if we don't think they're up to it, we're going to need to get a non-exec that we can lean on. So that's the game. The game is that they want to put the money in. They want to come and observe and be a part of the board and offer support and advice where they can. But the non-exec chair is supporting the exec in a way that that the PE house can be comfortable in to know that we're doing the right things. So we appointed a chair, and one of the things that on one of your previous podcasts was about the importance of appointing a chair, and it's so difficult to get that right. Our previous chair that we appointed was an immensely intelligent individual and extremely experienced, and on paper, absolutely the right guy. But he and I had slightly differing views on how things should be done. And so what eventually transpired would be a compromise where we're both wrong. And so, the thing that I've learned about that is that, the chair's job is not to be the CEO. It's not. The chair's job is to guide the CEO. And the CEO's job is to listen and be open to that that guidance, and begin to affect change within the organization based on their experience. So we both went through, I think, a really interesting sort of baptism of fire. Now we have a new chair now. He is a great bloke, and I do wish him well, and he's still a shareholder. Great guy, and I don't have any bad feelings. But he and I actually started to understand each other more at year 3, and we started to sort of recognize where each other were at a little bit more. But at this time, it was like, right, okay, actually, some fresh, new thinking, new ideas, fresh blood would re-energize me. And so from there, we appointed a new chair, new energy, in a different not a different direction, but just, different ideas. And it felt great. So the point that you're making is that relationship has to be right. That one has to be right. The relationship with the PE house is important. But the chair and the non-exec, it has to be really, really good. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no. I was going to say, so the first was obviously, so you've had 2 chairs. The first chair, was he brought in by YFM, or where's the sort of crossover? Was he there before, or
no? So YFM suggested some candidate.
Right, okay.
When I look back, what he's done for our business, in terms of really pushing certain agendas, it is transformational and it is amazing. And what he's done is truly fantastic. And it's just, okay, now onwards for me.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you, the next question is about, all right, you've got this money from YFM, how do you spend it? But before we do, I think that topic of your chairman in the broadest sense actually feeds into this week's business surgery. So for those who haven't listened previously, the business surgery, I ask our listeners and viewers to send in their business problems, and myself and the guest give a potential answer to it. And this week's question came in from Amy Bolton. She doesn't put her company name on. Amy says, our team is growing and I'm recruiting. Any tips on writing job descriptions and roles and responsibility documents? And I suppose you probably should have one for your chairman as well, but I'll have a go at this first, and Adam, you can have a go. In my job, or my business, we used to write really long, convoluted roles and responsibility documents, which actually were a waste of time. And my number two, who came in, Simon, suggested a different way of doing it, and we had a 4-line roles and responsibilities document. The first line was a simple explanation of why are you here in this business. So if you're the sales director, it's to increase sales. If it's the web developer, it's to make the website as optimized as possible. And then underneath that why sentence was 3 key areas of responsibility. And pretty much that was it. And the reason we did it like that, and the reason I think it worked really, really well, was when you sit down and do things like appraisals and team meetings and feedback and stuff like that, you can say to somebody, your roles and responsibilities said you are responsible for X. That's it. So it's clear what you're supposed to be doing, but it's also clear what you're not supposed to be doing. And therefore it's clear what you will be judged on. And they worked, this sort of new style roles and responsibilities document we had worked really, really well. So that's what I would recommend you do. So 1 line that just says why you're here, 3 key areas of responsibility, and that's it. If you want to add a bit more detail, add it. But the more you add, the more complicated it gets. Adam, how do you do your roles and responsibilities documents for your staff?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's beautiful advice, and I think I'm always behind simplicity is clear, is important, and it's got to be clear and simple. I would say that to layer onto your advice would be to say, actually, let's take a view of the organization first of all, and let's look at the responsibilities of the functions within the business. So what's the responsibilities of the sales team? Well, it's to get revenue, but not just revenue. It's good, high quality revenue. What's the responsibility of CS? What's the responsibility of finance? So on, so on. And then what you do is you just cascade those responsibilities down into those job descriptions. So layering on top of your advice, the job description is just one piece in that jigsaw, and you just got to make sure that fits in the overall jigsaw. If you're asking your sales team to do something and CS to do something that isn't aligned, then you're going to find that you're going potentially in the wrong direction.
Great. Yep. I like that. Because there's no point you saying you go and do X and you go and do Y, and either they conflict or they don't, there's a bit in the middle that's not being done at all.
Well, who's doing that bit?
Yeah. It's not on my job description. It's not on my job description. It's not mine.
Yeah.
The other thing I would
personally as well.
Go on.
Sorry.
No, you go first. Go on.
Okay. One of the things that I always hate is duality in roles as well. So when you hire somebody that is, oh, well, you can do this and this, right? That rarely works unless it is actually birds of a feather. It's the same thing, just dressed differently. I don't like dual roles. So you've got your finance person and they also do some HR. Or you've got a sales guy and he does the onboarding or something like that. It very rarely works. You might decide that when you are bootstrapping, you've got to do some of that, but get out of it quickly. Know that somebody cannot succeed in their own head with their own identity if they have duality.
Yeah. And obviously the classic duality role is the sales and marketing director. 2 completely different tasks, but sales and marketing director or sales and marketing manager, Two completely different skill sets, but they always get thrown together. So, Amy, I hope that answers your question. I hope that's really helpful. If anybody else wants to send in their business problem for a future business surgery, email phil@leadsbusinesspodcast.com, and me and a future guest hopefully will solve your problem. So, Adam, we've talked about all sorts of things. You've got this YFM money. You've got a big bag of cash. How did you spend it? Because that's the other thing is, right, we've got this money. What are we going to do with it?
Yeah, so it was like Brewster's Millions. Do you remember that movie with Richard Pryor? I think sort of we did things that I didn't believe in, and I think that's my fault, to have not been a bit more sort of following my instincts. And so we created, we grew the organization very quickly. And we grew it from the bottom up rather than the top down. And that's the difference between a bootstrap mentality and a funded mentality. Funded mentality says you get the top guys in, the guys that that can understand the brand, done it before, know how to manage people, and then you fill in beneath. Whereas the bootstrap mentality is get troops on the ground, and we'll pull the strings from here. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You create chaos. The burden that you place on your existing team members managing these people that probably haven't been hired properly, probably aren't going to succeed, is vast. So you have this sort of operational efficiency dip. And, it's masked by the fact that, well, you've got money, you're burning cash, you're burning cash because you're making investments, but actually it's just an operational efficiency dip. The people that you did have in post aren't doing as well today because they're supporting too many new people. So that was a big challenge. It's get the right people in the top, and then move through the gears, but go slow. There is no race. There was this fallacy that I sort of was led to believe or believed, which was PE wants you to spend the money. Of course they do. But they want you to be really cautious, really diligent, do it in a slow, controlled, measured manner. And that's what's really, really important. And to be fair, that was my mistake. And that's the bit that if I could go back in time and correct, I would say hold your powder. Because here's the thing. And this is the dilemma, and this is the problem. So you get money. Everybody in the organization is part of this rapidly growing business with loads of cash. And it's like, yay, let's get a helter-skelter in the office. Let's do crazy things like that. And it just feels like you can do anything, right? And then guess what? The money starts to run out because the operational efficiency had taken such a big dip that the growth in revenue didn't catch up with the cash burn to replace the money. So here's what you have to do. You either take more money as a follow-on, or you make course corrections. And if you make course corrections, what does that do to the mentality of the business? Well, all of a sudden, you're not a well-funded apple of everybody's eye tech business in the ascendancy. You're cutting back, you're pulling back. So all of a sudden, the mentality within the business changes. It doesn't feel like it did in the early days, or it doesn't feel like you wanted it to feel. So the advice is that just deliver that in measured quantities so you keep that permanent high of we are a growing tech business. Because the flip side of that is we're actually struggling for cash, and we need to make some course corrections, and people have to lose their jobs potentially, or we have to say goodbye to some initiatives that we've got going on or whatever. And you don't want that, because why would you embark on something that wasn't going to work? So take it steady. And Mike Clark said to me on the week that the investment landed, he said, I want to meet you at Christmas. I think it was 2 or 3 months away, and have a beer over at Christmas and celebrate a couple of good senior hires. And I took that and I thought, yeah, that's smart, that. Anyway, next week, in walks 10 new sales guys. And there began the problem. So not quite 10, but or quite like that. But yeah, you get the picture. Yeah, it's all in the past now. 5 years ago,
So,
4 years back.
almost the good habits of bootstrapping in its broadest sense go out the window because you think, oh, I've got all this money, I can spend it on slides and beanbags and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Which obviously slides and beanbags don't pay the bills.
It looks good on the job ad. Okay. Every week we ask our guests to give us a how-to. So, Adam, tell us what you're going to teach us how to do, and then teach us how to do it.
Yeah, well, on the vein of what we've been talking about, it's how to develop a team to support scale. So there's sort of 5 steps that I've got, but first there's 3 pitfalls. The pitfalls of getting this wrong are the fact that over promoting, right? I don't know whether you've seen this before. You've got somebody who's great at their job, and you make them a leader and they fail. Where they were great at their job, why can't you now manage teams of people that do your job? You know what you're doing. So over promoting is not everybody needs it, wants it, has it in the locker, whatever, it's fine. So we have to avoid that. The next thing is a reduction in standards as we scale. I don't want to see the food going out of the restaurant with, half cooked or half baked or returns coming back. Standards need to be maintained. And the other one is burnout, your personal burnout as a founder, as a director, whatever. You cannot be suboptimal. You have to maintain a clear, consistent vision, and you can't do that if you burn out. So first one, you have to define what your vision and your mission and your purpose is. And it doesn't have to be sort of a hard and fast vision, mission, and purpose. It can be, do we agree on a problem? And so for me, the agreement for the problem is, do we agree that marketeers today aren't competing against their competitors? They're competing against global brands for the attention of our customers. I send out emails, I'm sat against Netflix, I'm sat against Amazon, I'm sat against the biggest brands on the planet. Where's my attention going? It's not the fact my inbox is full of photocopier salespeople trying to sell me photocopiers. That's not what it is. So my attention is tight. Can we agree that's a problem? And if we can agree that's a problem, let's figure out how we're going to fix it. And so if you can find people that can agree with you on the problem, on the vision, the mission and purpose, whatever it is, do you agree? Do you believe it? Are you connected to the challenge? Yes, brilliant. Let's go. The next one is we've got to actually lead from the front. So this is the difficult one. So you watch videos of Elon Musk and he's got his desk on the factory floor and all the rest of it. And it's like, yeah, you do. But not all of Elon Musk is about him being amazing. He's probably got 20% of his personality, which is just bad. And actually, if he could take that away, he'd be so much more potentially. But he has got the vision in spades. You've got to lead from the front, which means that the standards that I expect, I deliver personally. Now, what that doesn't mean is I've got to get on the tools and show you how to use the tools all the time. If you're showing people how to use the tools, you probably hired the wrong guys. So hiring slowly and making sure they can do it. You lead from the front, from a standards perspective, being on time. Which I'm 3 minutes late today, Phil. I apologize for that. Being effective and prepared, being well read, understand, do your 10,000 hours. The next thing is a clear org structure, which we've talked about just a moment ago in the surgery, which is you've got to know what the functions in your business are there to do. And it's got to be clear. And I've already said I don't like duality. If there's a gap, let's figure out how we're going to fill it. And if that is some duality for a period of time, it can only be a period of time. And so ultimately, if there's a gap, we will make more money by filling the gap. So cost generates return. But if I get it wrong, it's just cost. So I've got to look at how I fill the gaps effectively. Now, the next thing is, right, this is the tricky bit, and this is the secret sauce that not many people, I think, get, and I find it hard. You've got to know when to step out. You've got to know when to leave oxygen in the room. When you've got a team of highly capable, highly skilled individuals, you have got to know when is the right time to let them demonstrate to you their abilities. I found this probably about 3 years ago. I went on holiday for 2 weeks, came back, found nobody missed me, and actually loads of great stuff happened. Okay, cool. I thought it's good when I go on holiday, isn't it? Went on holiday again in the November, and came back, and I found people running to me to present to me the great work that they'd done. I was like, oh, this is different. And then what I found is actually, if I can start to operate in 6 monthly, 2-quarter cycles at a time, right? So my thinking is not this half, it's next half, right? Why? Because the guys are thinking about this half. The team is thinking about, the exec team are thinking about this half. The senior leadership team are thinking about this half. The guys on the floor are thinking about this week. And so everybody operate in the scales of the business operates on a different time scale. And my time scale has to be further out than anybody else's. So what I then learned, which was really important, is if I've got a well-organized structure, if I've got the right people in the team that understand that they agree with my challenge, my job is to set what I want them to achieve in the next half. That's all my job is. Yeah, I'm there to wipe some bums now and again and help out and be the figurehead from here and there. But really, that's not my job. My job is to say, right, next half, guys, we want to have this all resolved. And that should result in this, and this. Once I've delivered that, the oxygen in the room is go away and tell me how you're going to do it. Present it back to me. Whereas leaders quite often want to go in and debate it with the guy. Oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought, maybe if you did it like this? What if you did it like this? It's more powerful to let them come back and have thought about. And if there's blazing gaps, you've got to raise it, but in a quiet, professional, calm manner. But you're 6 months ahead of yourself. So it doesn't matter if they get it wrong today. It doesn't matter because they're thinking about something that's happening in 6 months' time. And that's where we've got to be. And you know, Jeff Bezos said to me, sometimes, you know, investors, they celebrate me on a good quarter. And I always turn around to them and say, I don't care about this quarter. I'm worried about Q5 in 3 years' time. You know, so it's kind of like, yeah, that's the point. Exec team work in 6 months, SLT in 3 months, leaders in this month, doers in day to day. Yeah, that's the time frame. The final step is compensation. Compensation is critical. If you know, buying somebody cheap rarely has a long game. You know, it's marginal gains for very little benefit. You know, making sure that your compensation packages are in line with, and if not slightly more beneficial than the market, is really important. Take that problem away. Just make sure that everybody is able to do what they do. I mean, all right, you can't overpay because that's just bad business. But at the same time, you know, you getting some marginal advantage from underpaying somebody is, you know, unless you're giving them shares as you know, in exchange for that, then it's not fair. And so you've got to make sure that you're paying people appropriately. And the reality of it is, I've found over the years, and Phil, you might have run through this particular gauntlet as well, is you know, the EMI options. And the EMI options are what we give people to connect them to the business challenge, and they get some money when we sell, if we sell. And the problem actually is employees don't value that until the minute they crystallize. And so it's hard, really, and compensation in the moment is what people value. Yes, I'm not saying they don't value the options, and perhaps people that have been through businesses, had options exercised, they value them. But if you've never had options exercised, it's nice for me to have them. And yes, thank you for giving them me. But it's more about that, my pay packet, what I earn, and that's the key bit. So that was 5 steps, believe it or not, and they were the things that I find are really, really important. You've got to get out of the weeds and let the team grow and do the great work for you.
You know, one of the things I do as a business sounding board is I help business owners not be in the weeds and take a step back and make sure they're not lonely at the top. But yeah, brilliant advice there, Adam. Absolutely love that. Some fantastic stuff there. Now, before we come on to your final Leeds Business Podcast shout out to somebody else, I've got some shout outs to do. I think by the time this comes out, it'll have been about 3 weeks ago. I was at the Lifted Ventures conference and we gave away loads of Leeds Business Podcast biscuits. And everybody who got a biscuit and posted a selfie on LinkedIn, tagging me and the Leeds Business Podcast and the biscuitery, gets a shout out. So this week's shout outs go to the following people. Thank you for your selfie. Ali Mortimer, life consultant and exec coach. Anna Ashford, who heads up Alt Legal. Sandra Patel, who's an advocate for equity and industry. I think that's the industry. And Kate Hutchinson, the founder of the sustainability community. Thank you, everybody. If you'd like a Leeds Business Podcast biscuit and to do a selfie and get yourself a shout out, just drop me an email at phil@leedsbusinesspodcast.com and I'll send you one of our wonderful biscuits. And if you want to find out where they came from the girls at the biscuitery who were on a previous episode. So look that up, and links to that will be in the show notes. Adam, final question. Who's your shout out to today?
Yeah, it's a company called Bobble Digital, based in Leeds, and they are a digital agency. You might come across them, but the reason why I'm shouting out about them is they're run by a guy called Manny, and Manny is one of life's good guys, and you know what? The world needs people like Manny. He's got the energy, he's got the passion, he's got the drive. He's going for it. So good luck to him.
Okay, and there'll be a link to Bobble Digital in the show notes. I know Manny, and I've been on his podcast, and I agree, great guy. Adam, it's been absolutely fantastic, really, really educational, really fascinating. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you found it interesting, inspiring, and of use. To make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, please subscribe to the show. Go on, do it now. Do it now before you go off and do something else. Thank you. Much appreciated. Oh, and don't forget our fair deal. See you next week.